Thank you for joining us tonight, and welcome to the Northwest Consumer Law Center webinar series, How to Survive the Financial Impacts of COVID-19. Today's webinar is Managing Consumer Debt Amid COVID-19, Credit Cards, Medical Bills, and more. My name's Amanda Martin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Consumer Law Center. Today, we have Northwest Consumer Law Center Board Member Sam Leonard with us, who will be discussing options for those financially struggling to pay their bills during this public health crisis. If you have questions during the presentation, please enter those in the chat box on your right. We will be answering questions after Sam's presentation. This session is being recorded and will be available on our website tomorrow by noon. Attending this webinar does not create an attorney-client relationship. This presentation provides legal information and is not a substitute for individualized legal advice. If you're seeking legal assistance, we recommend that you contact the Northwest Consumer Law Center after this session. Information on how to apply for our services will be posted at the end of this webinar. You'll find Sam's handouts in the Handouts tab on your right, and with that, I'll hand it over to Sam.
Thank you, Amanda, and welcome everybody. My name is Sam Leonard. I'm a private attorney, and I also sit on the board of Northwest Consumer Law Center. I focus my practice on consumer debt and debt collection, which are pressing issues, I know, for everybody at this time. So what I'm going to talk about is credit card debt, medical bills, and other debts. I won't be covering mortgage debt or landlord-tenant debts or student loans. Those were the subject of previous webinars that you can get online at the site. So what do? Your bills keep coming and you're not working, which I think is the case for many people right now. So the first thing is don't panic. There are options. The first thing you need to do is come up with a plan. You're not alone. There's a lot of people in this situation right now. So what I suggest is you think about it in two ways. There's the income side of things, and then there's the expenses side of things. And currently, both federal and state governments have come up with bills and orders that can help on both sides of that equation. So part one, income. If you've lost your job, you've been laid off, you've been furloughed, or you're otherwise not receiving income that you used to receive, you're a contract employee, a gig worker, apply for unemployment benefits right now. Don't wait. Don't assume that you're not eligible. Just apply. Currently, the system, the Washington Unemployment Security Department is taking tons of applications. You want to be early in that process, not late. They're overwhelmed. I think I'd heard that the number of applications was 12 times what it was the previous month. So you need to get out and get on it right now. Another thing you can do is research what is available. But when you research what is available and you go online, you need to be careful. Look to government websites. Look to other trusted websites that you know, so Northwest Consumer Law Center, for instance. Do not go to websites you've never been to looking for solutions to this problem, as is the case, unfortunately, with most situations where people are in financial need. There's always going to be those out there that prey on that fear. So when you're looking for solutions, .gov sites, .org sites, and places that you know and have been to before. One resource out there that I think a lot of people don't know about is getting onto your representative, your local representative's website, because those in Congress, those in the Senate, they're kind of on the front lines of dealing with legislation that's coming out really quickly. And so for information on the CARE Act, which was recently passed, a good place to go is to on onto your House representative's website to see what information they have. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Part 2, expenses. Call your creditors. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say, I don't have a job. I had a job yesterday and I don't have one today. You're in the same boat as a lot of other people. Try and get agreements with people you have expenses with. So talk to them, see what the options are, and if you can get them to agree to some sort of plan to deal with your current unemployment, your current inability to pay your expenses, get that in writing. Because while two people can make an agreement and form a contract, later on, as we saw in the mortgage foreclosure crisis, having conversations with people isn't going to help you if the people you entered into a verbal agreement with all of a sudden forget that you've agreed to a forbearance or something like that. So if you can, communicate via email or some other medium that you can keep a copy of those conversations. And it's important to remember that your rights vary depending on the debt. If you watch some of the other webinars, the student loan webinar and the landlord tenant and mortgage webinars all talked about the different rights you have in those different situations with those different lenders. So it's important to understand that. And if you're, looking for resources or trying to figure out what to do with your expenses, you need to look for sites and places that are specific to the issue you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with your student loans, you go to the student loan webinar, you go to the Department of Ed to see what plans are in place. There's not one solution for every expense. And while it seems like everything's closed down, it's important to remember that nonprofit legal aid organizations like Northwest Consumer Law Center are still open. You can't walk in, but you can still call. And I know that there's a lot of attorneys out there in the nonprofit legal aid world that want to help. They're eager to help. And so if you pick up the phone or if you do an online application, somebody will get back to you, because we know that, this is causing a problem for a lot of people. And the debt issues that are going to arise are going to be big in people's lives. And if you get out in front of it, if you have a plan, you get out in front of it, you'll be much better off than if you don't deal with it right away. So I'd like to talk about a little bit more detail about the unemployment benefits. So legislation is coming out at a very rapid pace. So I don't know that anybody has a really firm grasp on all the benefits that are available under state and federal law at any given moment, given the pace at which things are changing. But what I can say is that a lot of what is being offered and distributed through employment security. So Washington State Department of Employment Security, they handle unemployment benefits. They're also handling the aid that's coming through the federal government, and we'll talk about that. So the benefits, you can look into your benefits and see what's available by applying. And right here, there's a link to the COVID-19 page of Washington's Employment Security Department. And they have a great tutorial on what to do. But the one thing, and I can't stress this enough, is apply now. You have to get in your application. Gig employees are now covered by the new legislation. So who is eligible? Laid off workers, furloughed workers, gig workers. I don't know that anybody knows who all is covered, but it's a lot broader than it was prior to this crisis. The CARE Act from the federal government is expanding how long you can receive benefits, who's eligible for benefits. Washington State's trying to do the exact same thing. So how long does it take? In a recent story, I think in the Seattle Times this morning, they said that it was taking up to 3 weeks to receive benefits. And if you look at your calendar and you look at when your bills are coming due, 3 weeks is a long time. Bills are due at the beginning of the month. 3 weeks from now will be towards the end of the month, and the bills will be past due maybe. And so you want to get in right away. Even if you were to apply now and not get your benefits for 3 weeks, it's my understanding that you will receive benefits for the time that you were eligible, even though your application didn't get approved till later. So that's something important to keep in mind. So here's maybe some of the biggest news. How long do the benefits last? The benefits that you receive can last up to 39 weeks. So that's almost 9 months of unemployment security payments. The Federal Care Act is providing $600 a week on top of what the state provides. So there's a decent chance that you could receive all of or close to what was your regular income before this crisis hit and you could no longer work. So once again, apply now. Okay, so let's talk about expenses. One of the largest expenses that anybody has is medical debt. And that your burden and how much you're required to pay, and a lot of times is dependent on what insurance you have. Because a substantial percentage of individuals get their insurance through their employer, this is probably a pretty uncertain time for whether or not you have coverage, and if you do have coverage, what it is, and if you don't have coverage, what do you need to do? That's a very important question that you need to get answered. So if you can still contact your employer, you need to contact them and you need to ask them right away, do I still have coverage? How long will I have coverage through? You can also contact your insurance companies to make sure that you're still covered and figure out how long you will have coverage. There's also COBRA. COBRA provides for the same insurance you had while employed for a set period of time. I can't recall the exact amount of time, but you have to pay the monthly bill for your insurance if you use COBRA. If you don't have insurance or you've lost your insurance and there's no way to get it back, you can register through Washington's Affordable Care Act marketplace. The open enrollment deadline was moved till April 8th, so that doesn't give you a lot of time, but you can go on and apply for plans. There's plans that will cover all levels of income, and so you need to get on that. That needs to be a part of your plan. Go apply, figure out if you have insurance, and if you don't, then start looking at your options. And one of those options is the Affordable Care Act marketplace that Washington has, and there's a link on the slide for that as well. The website's relatively easy to use. There's an application button. You click on that and you fill out the boxes. So there's also Apple Health, which is Medicaid. There's a link to look into that as well. You may be eligible if you are unemployed for substantially subsidized benefits. And it's important to keep in mind that, what your income was a month ago or 2 months ago shouldn't define the benefits that you might be entitled to. And there may be special programs that deal specifically with folks that have lost income due to this crisis. The last thing and most important point is you cannot be denied medically necessary care if you cannot pay. Your health comes first. Bills suck and medical debt really sucks. But if you have an emergent need for healthcare, go in. If you don't have insurance, they still have to treat you. So get in there, take care of yourself first, and then there's options afterwards that can help you deal with the financial consequences. One of those options is charity care. If you don't know, in Washington, if you don't have insurance or insurance doesn't cover medical expenses, you may be eligible for charity care. State and federal laws require hospitals provide charity care. So it's important to understand first that charity care doesn't cover all medical providers. Your large hospitals, like Harborview, they're required to provide charity care. Smaller entities like some of the groups of surgeons and doctors that aren't affiliated with larger hospitals, a lot of times are not required to provide charity care. Ask. If you go get treatment and you feel like you might need charity care, ask. While they are required to disclose while hospitals are required to disclose eligibility for charity care, it's always in your benefit to ask. Ask for an application. Ask if it's available. Be willing to assert yourself and ask what help is out there, because there's a lot of programs and a lot of times people don't get to take advantage of those programs because they don't know about them. Even some of the entities that are not required to provide charity care oftentimes will provide charity care under their own guidelines and their own rules. But if they're not required to provide it, they may not disclose it. So you definitely need to ask. Eligibility for charity care is determined by your income. If you have lost all of your income, then there's a good chance that you will be eligible for charity care. If the treatment is medically necessary and your income is, you have relatively low income, you're likely eligible for charity care and to have the hospital cover up to 100% of the treatment. If you're denied charity care or you request a charity care application and they don't give you one, you should contact an attorney immediately. There are legal aid organizations, there's Northwest Consumer Law Center and a ton of other clinics and legal aid organizations that can evaluate your situation and make sure that you weren't wrongfully denied an application. A lot of times people are eligible, they're at an institution that's supposed to provide charity care and they're not provided the required documents. You need to talk to somebody who knows if you think that you were denied charity care or an application and you should have received one. And legal nonprofits and folks at legal aid clinics can evaluate your situation and help you navigate that. So let's talk next about credit card debt. What do you do? You've been charging things on your credit card and you see your bill, it's coming in the mail, you know it's coming and you know you don't have the income to pay it. Or if you do have the money to pay it, you were planning on using that money for something else. You have to prioritize your debt obligations. If you have limited income or savings, you need to figure out what's most important to spend that money on. A lot of times, the top of that list should not be your credit card debt. Also with credit card debt, there's minimum payment amounts if you can just pay the minimum. And that doesn't impact your ability to do more necessary things like pay your rent, then you can do that. But also credit card companies, even if you miss for a month, they're not likely to put your account into default and close it and charge it off. So you need to definitely take a look at your situation and prioritize which debts are most important for you to pay. Another thing is you can contact the credit card company and see if they have options. It's always important in these situations to reach out, especially in a situation like this where everybody's feeling the impact of this very quickly. And businesses are aware of this, banks are aware of this. A lot of times they have options that you don't know about because they're not being broadcasted. And if you just call them and talk to them, you'll find that there may be an option that will help you defer payments. I went and did an online search today. Bank of America has a program, I didn't look at the details, that allows you to defer payments on your loan obligations. A lot of the banking institutions, the ones that I looked at, have a web page saying, we're here to help, here's the number, blah, blah, blah. But you have to remember when you do these things that if you can get any agreement in writing, if somebody tells you that your payments can be deferred without interest or something like that, you need to ask them to send you confirmation of that. There's nothing wrong with having that conversation with somebody and then saying, can you please send me an email to confirm that so I have it. If later we come out of this crisis, you're back on your feet, you have your job, life is going good, and then somebody comes out of the blue and says you owe us $20,000 for these payments that you were supposed to make, and you don't have any proof that they agreed to some settlement on those payments or something else in writing, it's going to be really hard to assert your rights. So whenever possible, ask for any agreement in writing. It gets on to the next thing. Be careful about taking out new loans. There's oftentimes a temptation to do everything in your power to keep your bills paid. And that's understandable. And I feel the same way. But don't dig holes that are deeper and deeper and deeper. There's options out there for dealing with debt. There are attorneys that can help you manage it. There are options with private entities that you hold the debt with. If things get really bad, there's bankruptcy. But if you continue to take out more loans and more loans and more loans, and you're just increasing the amount of debt you have, then you may not be solving the actual problem. It's not that taking out additional loans are going to be a bad idea in all situations. Currently, the CARE Act has put out a lot of low interest, no interest loans for entities to keep the employers, to keep their employees on the payroll and to come out of this. And, that may be the right option, but you need to consider those choices very carefully because there will be an end to this. And the choices that we all make during this time, we need to think about them long term. I cannot stress this enough. Do not use your retirement savings to pay your debts. Do not use your 401k. Do not use IRAs. Do not take loans against your retirement savings. Retirement savings is in most instances protected. That means if you're garnished, they can't come after that. If you file for bankruptcy, you get to keep your retirement savings. The reality is, if you look at it very long term, you are still going to want to retire someday. You are still going to want to end your working life, if possible, and go on off into retirement. And your retirement can be protected if you don't borrow against your retirement savings, if you're lucky enough to have it. So before you decide to make a decision like that, borrowing against your 401k, taking money out of your IRA early, or anything like that, you should contact an attorney, a financial aid advisor, or something like that to figure out what the consequences of that actually are. During the foreclosure crisis, a ton of folks borrowed against their 401ks in an attempt to stay solvent. In the end, a lot of times what that does is it just depletes your your retirement or your retirement savings, impacting your ability to retire, and prolongs the underlying issues that was created because you lost your job. Moving on next. So can collectors come after me during the COVID-19 crisis? The answer is yes. If you have debt already in collections and collection agencies are coming after you for debts, they can still contact you, they can still send you letters, they can still call you to collect on those debts. There is not a cease and desist for collection in Washington. There is in some states, I believe Nevada is one of them, where collection activities have been halted by an order of the governor. I believe it's the governor. That is not true in Washington. That said, on March 23rd, Jay Inslee entered the stay-home executive order requiring non-essential employees to stay home. Debt collectors were not on the list of essential employees. And under Washington law, debt collectors cannot make collection calls from unlicensed places. So collection agents can't remotely work from home making collection calls to trying to collect on a debt. So if you receive a call from a debt collector, it would be a good idea to ask them where they're calling from, or get the name of the collection agency. If you're getting calls, contact Northwest Consumer Law Center or another legal aid organization and tell them that you're continuing to be hounded. Because with all the stress that's out there already, dealing with the stress of debt collectors constantly calling you is a lot more, I think, than any of us want to handle or want to deal with. And you have options. There's a decent chance that those collection calls are illegal because they're being made from an unlicensed location. That may not always be the case because a lot of collectors are from out of state, but in many instances that may be the case. And if a debt collector violates Washington collection law and trying to collect against you, it improves your ability to settle with them or to deal with that debt later, because it gives you rights against them. And so if you're getting calls from collectors now, if you're receiving letters, hold on to those communications, keep track of those communications, and reach out to an attorney. It's important that you talk to attorneys that know this area of law. So that's why Northwest Consumer Law Center and entities like them are really important. Let's say that you get served. You can still be served in Washington with lawsuits, collection lawsuits. That is still happening. It's happening less and less because process servers oftentimes are not serving people. But during this crisis, you can still be served. And while most courts are closed or providing limited services, you still need to respond to the lawsuit. While it seems like everything's shut down, that doesn't apply to your responsibilities under the law to respond to a lawsuit. So if you're ever served, your first call should be to an attorney or a nonprofit to get legal advice on what to do. The legal clinics aren't generally still open, but the legal aid organizations are. So while you can't walk into Northwest Consumer Law Center or go to King County Bar Association Neighborhood Legal Clinic, you can still call and get advice. If you go on Northwest Consumer Law Center's website, there's a lot of links that we'll be putting up on the COVID-19 resources page of entities that you can call. And it's really important to remember that even if you can't file something with the courts, that you can't go into the court because the court's closed, you still have to give a notice of your appearance in a lawsuit. And you have to do that within 20 days. First thing you should always do is call an attorney. If you wind up for some reason having to do it yourself, you can go online to washingtonlawhelp.org, and there's some forms on there where you can answer a lawsuit. If you don't appear and say, I received the lawsuit, I'm here, they can go and get a judgment against you without giving you notice. While they may not be able to do that now because the courts are in large part closed down, they will be able to do that after this is over. So you need to make sure that you give notice that you're here. And calling Northwest Consumer Law Center or going online to Washington Law Help, there's forms and instructions on how to do that. But generally what you need to do is you need to send whoever sued you a letter saying, I dispute this debt, here is my contact information. Now there's more to it than that, and you should contact an attorney. But what's really important is that you act now. So before we get to questions, I'm going to show you one other thing here. This right here discusses who is eligible for benefits, unemployment compensation, and it gives you various examples of situations and gives you kind of an explanation on what type of benefits may be available to you. I'm not going to walk through the whole thing, but this is included in the materials. And what you can see when you look through this is a lot of employees that weren't covered with unemployment security prior to this crisis now are. Mainly and really important in this area, gig employees. So it's important to look at this and, like I said, apply for unemployment security immediately. Even if you think you're not eligible, you may be. And that's what I have. So maybe
Yes,
questions.
if you have questions, go ahead and enter those on the chat box on your right. We'll start with a question about where yesterday's student loan presentation is located on our website. If you go to nwclc.org/COVID-19, you can find recordings of all the webinars that we have done. This recording should be up by noon tomorrow. Or if you just go to our main homepage, there's a link right there to go to the COVID-19 page. Sam, the first question for you is, when you say find out where the debt collectors are calling from, do you mean what state, or also whether they're in an actual office and what location?
Yeah, so typically they'll announce who they're from and give you a disclosure at the beginning. It's important, and you're well within your rights to ask questions of them, and you should. Anybody that calls you and claims that you owe them money, I would ask them, you know, who do they work? Who are they calling on behalf of? What is the debt? Where are they calling you from? Are they calling you from the office? Where's the office located at? Right? And ask questions and really drill down on who this person works for and where they're calling from. Are they calling from the office? Probably not if they're a Washington licensed, in-state Washington licensed debt collector, because they're not an essential employee, and therefore they're not supposed to still be going into work. So it's kind of one of those, you ask questions until you can't think of any other questions to ask type of situations. Where are you calling me from? Who do you work for? What's this debt about? You know, where's your office located? Stuff like that. Oftentimes they'll try and engage you in a conversation to encourage you to pay. I would just ask the questions that you have and tell them you'll call them back or get back to them after you look into it. Don't spend a lot of time on the phone. Just get enough information so you can share it with an attorney when you talk to them. A lot of times if you talk to a consumer attorney and you can just give them the name of the entity that called you, that's a big step in the right direction.
Is about unemployment. If someone was collecting unemployment, but their 26 weeks ended mid-February, is there some other program to get them covered that is on the handout that you provided?
So if you were collecting unemployment and you ran out of unemployment in mid-February, I don't know. I don't know the specific answer of whether or not you can get, if there's another program, but what I will say is call employment security, because now the benefits can go up to 39 weeks. The care package provides for an additional 13 weeks. It provides for $600 a week in benefit. So if your 26 weeks has expired, I don't see why you wouldn't be entitled to that additional 13 weeks under the CARE Act. And so you should definitely call and check in. Also, if you're unemployed and you don't have any income, and maybe you haven't for a while, then you can also expect a check. They're sending out checks for about $1,200 to folks that make below a certain amount of money. I don't have all the details on that because those details are a little bit, I haven't been able to find them yet, but there's a decent chance that you could receive a check, a one-time check as well. That it's my understanding that's based on your taxes, either your 2018 or 2019 taxes. If you didn't have a lot of money in 2019, but you haven't filed your taxes yet, you may want to do that immediately.
Last question for tonight. Please see our website to watch the recordings of the other sessions in the Northwest Consumer Law Center webinar series, How to Survive the Financial Impacts of COVID-19. Sessions on rent, landlord-tenant law, mortgages, foreclosure moratoriums, and student loans are currently available on our website, and the recording of this webinar will be posted by noon tomorrow. Please join us for the last webinar in our series taking place tomorrow at 6 p.m. We'll be talking about bankruptcy and considerations for filing during a financial crisis. You can sign up online at nwclc.org/COVID-19. If you're seeking legal assistance, you're welcome to contact the Northwest Consumer Law Center to apply for our services. We are able to help those of low and moderate incomes in Washington State. You can apply online at our website, nwclc.org/get-help, or by phone at 206-805-1722. If you have questions after this webinar, you're welcome to contact us at admin@nwclc.org. And to support our work, you can make a contribution online by going to our website. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and take care.